you have to learn a true understanding of what you control and what you don't control. If you don't control something, I just kind of push it aside and say, let's put this on the back burner. Let's focus on what I can control and create an action plan there. And then for the things that you don't control, it's all about contingency planning. And within Eaton, we like to use, well, what if this? What would you do? What if this? And we don't necessarily come up with a dozen scenarios, but what are the 3 most probable scenarios of what you don't control? And just be prepared for how you might respond, because we don't want to be put in that reactive situation. We want to have a plan.
Welcome to Over A Pint, where we focus on the fast-paced, never-changing world of marketing told through the eyes of industry veterans with decades of in-the-trenches experience. No theory here. This is real-world, practical experience told to you by those that have been there, and that does include our guests. So grab a pint of your favorite local brewski or whatever your choice of drink may be and join us for the show. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Pat McGovern, new biz director at Acedia, an award-winning digital shop here in Milwaukee. And I'm Kurt Lingle, Vice President at Celtic, a full-service award-winning advertising agency headquartered in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward neighborhood. So Pat, today we have yet another fantastic guest coming on to the show. We are super excited to welcome Kerry Tingley to Over A Pint. In addition to Carrie being an incredibly talented and impressive professional and leader at a global manufacturer, full transparency here, she's also a friend. So Pat, no pressure on me here, but I really need to properly set up Carrie's introduction because she knows where and how to find me. But all jokes aside, Carrie is super impressive. Let me break it down for you a little bit. Carrie is a vice president, general manager at Eaton Corporation, a $17.9 billion. Yes, I said billion, a $17.9 billion global diversified power management company. Carrie leads the growth and manufacturing strategies for a $380 million business focused on industrial control and automation products. She's also a trained inclusion and diversity instructor for Eaton University. She holds an engineering degree and an MBA from Marquette University. Carrie is the mother of 3 teenage boys. She plays soccer. She volunteers. She sits on boards. She guest speaks, travels around the world. Oh, and by the way, she sits on podcasts with you and I, Pat. I could.
Jesus, couldn't we find somebody with a little bit more credentials, Kurt?
I was going to say, I don't know, how do you keep up with Carrie? I don't think you can. So it's impressive. But here's the deal. As we kind of get into the conversation, on our podcast, we continue to bring on guests from a wide variety of areas. We have literally touched all the bases here. Big brands, small brands, local, national, global, outdoor, tourism, healthcare, nonprofits, education, and yes, manufacturing. And what a topic in industry to be discussing today with everything that's going on in the country and around the globe. And as Carrie knows from firsthand experience, some of the most innovative branding and marketing that's taken place is often found in manufacturing and B2B. And let me tell you, there are careers and opportunities to be had as well. Manufacturers are recruiting some of the top talents. And I will say this, from an agency perspective, some of the most exciting, creative, and challenging brand assignments that our agency has been proud to be a part of throughout its 30-year history has come from the manufacturing universe. It's no longer a secret that the marketing magic these days isn't just happening at the typical consumer brands that come to mind. And I think you know the names I'm thinking of. We'll keep them nameless. At the end of the day, manufacturers are doing the same thing, and they're doing it with some serious gusto. So on that note, it is so great to have Carrie on as a guest. Carrie, welcome to Over A Pint.
Thank you, gentlemen. Of all those things you listed, Kurt, this is the fun aspect. This is the most fun of all of them.
Awesome. I love hearing that. So here's the deal, Carrie. It is called Over a Pint for a reason. It's our shtick. We like to go around the horn with our guests before we get into it, and we like to find out what everyone has in their glass. Tea, water, coffee, soda, beer, whatever your choice of liquid may be. What do you have, Carrie?
So I would say I'm more a occasional beer drinker, more a bourbon whiskey drinker. So today I'm trying the best of both worlds, which I did not quite know existed. So it is a Kentucky bourbon barrel ale. I'm going to take it from the bottle and be a little feisty and put it in my glass here.
That sounds delicious.
That is what I will be drinking.
Wow, that sounds really good. Mr. McGovern, what's your liquid today?
So today, guys, from Molson Coors, I've got a Blue Moon. I've got a Blue Moon Light Sky, which citrus wheat, which I'm very excited about. So, Carrie, so nice to have you on the show. I am pumped to be talking to you today. Thank you. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers too. So I am having. So I got to tell you, we have a lot of good beer on this show, Carrie. That's one of the great things about the podcast. But I am having a coffee stout from Central Waters. I am a big fan of Central Waters. If you've ever been to Amherst and you've seen their place up there, it is pretty cool. We got the place downtown now. They are doing great things, great beer. I thought for an afternoon chat, a coffee stout. So cheers. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
All right. So let's kick it off. So Carrie, the best place to start with these interviews is often to figure out what makes our guests tick, and we want to hear their story. So I want to start off just with a simple starting point. I guess if you could, let's hear your background. Let's hear your story. How did your journey start?
Sure. Well, I think it's fair to say that nobody grows up dreaming of a career in manufacturing. It just doesn't make that list with rock star or teacher or dancer. So I'll talk a little bit going back to high school. Quite frankly, I was an AP physics student my senior year, and I had a professor, Mr. Krolik, and we were talking one day, and I told him that I wanted to major in physics in college, and I wanted to be a professor. And he kind of shook his head and said, yeah, I get it. And, without dating myself, I will tell you this is give or take 25 years ago. So keep that in the back pocket. And he said, if you major in physics, that could be interesting. You could teach, you could research. But let me talk to you about mechanical engineering. And he explained the similarities and what it really was. And he encouraged me to think more broadly, saying you could still teach physics with this degree, but you're opening up so many more possibilities. And I chose this program at Clarkson University that was in engineering management with a specialization in mechanical engineering. And 25 years later, here I am working for a manufacturing company with Eaton. So I thought very progressive on Mr. Krolik's part to push me in this direction. Not knowing what I would do with the degree, I started my career with Eaton right out of school in technical sales. And I went through a rotational training program where you essentially work in every department from customer service to the operations floor, you're building product, you're doing a little bit of design engineering, you're working in accounting. I was calling customers with past due bills, and you learn the whole life of the product. And then I spent a good early portion of my career calling on customers in the Midwest area based out of Indianapolis for almost 5 years. Then from there, I moved into marketing in a couple different realms of product management. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about all of the different types of marketing roles within Eaton. Product management is just one aspect of it. And then there's much more you can do in marketing in a manufacturing company that I'd love to share. I worked in project management for a little bit. So going around the United States and Latin America, training people in our new product development process. And then eventually moved into more leadership type roles, switching back and forth between sales and marketing and into my current role as VP GM, where now I own the P&L. So manufacturing plans, all of the support functions, engineering, marketing, finance, HR, that's all part of my business and my responsibility. And it's a fun and exciting ride.
Um, that's a great overview, first of all, on your journey. And the other thing is, what was your professor's name?
Krolik, Krolik.
As we were chatting with you before the show, as we were kind of prepping with some of the pre-production setup and looking at your bio, I mean, it's clear to me as I look at what you studied in your discipline. It's like engineering, sales, marketing, management. I mean, you're very vertical within, which is fantastic. But I think it's like you come to the table with a lot of depth in a lot of different areas, whereas versus like just I'm good at this. I mean, Carrie is, and even as you were described how you were you kind of rose to the ranks at Eaton. I mean, that has had to have played to your advantage as you've kind of, right? I mean, as you've kind of evolved from this role to that role, and you've continued to be elevated. You're very deep in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I think, Kurt, what's really interesting about that is it was not necessarily intentional. And within Eaton, we have an employee-defined career progression process. So you as the employee own it. The company's here to support whatever your desires are. And we have people who are subject matter experts, PhDs in metallurgy, and just go straight in that functional avenue. I just by circumstance ended up working in a bunch of different areas of the company, but also different divisions. Again, Eaton being the large company you mentioned, there's so many different industries and divisions of the company that I went back and forth between. And we have a talent day process where we invite certain individuals to come in and you basically get speed dating with some key executives. So this was maybe 10 years ago. I was invited to join Eaton's Talent Day, and I was sitting down with a senior leader who said, when I look at your resume, what's really interesting is that this learning agility stands out to me, that you went into this area and you figured out what you needed to do, and then you moved into this area with new people, new product, new markets, new processes. Everything was new. Maybe it took you 6 to 12 months, figure out what you need to do, another couple years to do it. And then once you met those goals, we moved you somewhere else. And I think it's that balance of how much depth do you need in an area versus how much do you keep challenging yourself and taking on more responsibility and taking on new learnings to get to the point where you want to be in your career, whatever that may be.
Yeah. As we're starting to hear more of your story and our listeners are learning more about Carrie, obviously it's impressive as we're starting to hear your track and how you came to where you are. Equally impressive is the brand that you're a part of, Eaton. So I think to start getting the full picture here, so we're starting to learn more about Carrie. So if you could, I mean, 17.9 billion. I mean, this is a big company. Break it down for us, Carrie, in a simple way. What is Eaton all about? And as I kind of shared in some of the questions, the elevator speech, like in layman's terms, what is Eaton?
Yeah, at the core of it, Eaton is a power management company. You will see that powering business worldwide tagline underneath our logo and a lot of our advertising and marketing. So if you think about how much you rely in your life, business, personal, on what I would consider critical infrastructure and technology for everything that you do. You are organized through your cell phone. You are driving your car, whether it's regular or electric vehicle. You have electricity, all of these things that you rely on. Eaton is behind all of that. And we're almost the unknown brand behind all of that because you don't see our product. Now, if you go into your basement in your load center, you'll see our circuit breakers. But a lot of these other areas, you may not see our product on the front end, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is making that power management safer, more efficient, more reliable, and certainly sustainable. So whether it's storing information in a data center, hospitals and critical infrastructure, factories, and the automation piece you were talking about, running the electrical grid, all of that, Eaton is behind.
So and if I really quickly, I just want to ask this. So when you came out of school, you said you've been with Eaton your entire career.
Correct.
What, I mean, how much did you know about Eaton, and what sold you as a young student coming out, like, I'm going to start my career? I mean, what sold you on, like, let's start my career at Eaton and let's see where this goes?
Yeah, that's it's great that you asked that, because the honest answer is I'd never heard of Eaton. I didn't even want to interview with them on campus. I'd been to the career counseling office a couple times, and one of the ladies in there said, hey, we have this company coming. We need to fill some more slots. Can you just interview? I know you have 2 other job offers, including one from another local Milwaukee company, coincidentally, but could you just interview with them? I said, sure, I could do that. So I interviewed, and I just really hit it off with the hiring manager, and didn't think much of it, except for the fact that as I was a senior in college, there was a friend of mine a year ahead of me that was already working for Eaton. And he called me about 2 weeks after the interview saying, hey, I hear Ken's called you to follow up on your interview, and you're what we would say now, you're ghosting him. And I said, Sam, yeah, he's a really nice guy, but I've got this job offer. Here's what I'm going to do. I grew up on the East Coast. I want to stay on the East Coast. And Sam said, let me tell you a little bit more about Eaton, and will you just meet me for a beer? And we did, and we talked for an hour, and it was really my trust in him and what he shared about the company's values, the company's mission, and even in that short tenure he had, how impressed he was with the people inside the organization, that I took the job offer with Eaton.
Wow. It's been a great run.
It's been a great run. The company's been fantastic to me. I work hard. Don't get me wrong. I do my part.
My God, I'm sure you do.
It is a great company to work for.
Kurt, am I right? She is super. Carrie, you are super impressive with your background and everything. I mean, if the end of the world comes, they're putting you on the plane. Kurt and I aren't getting on any kind of plane.
I don't know about that.
Right? I mean, these guys.
Pat, Carrie will bring us onto the airplane. Now you're kind of
maybe
throw me out the
your
airplane.
baggage.
Oh, let's not go that far. There's room for me on that plane too.
So
we need a pilot on that plane. I can't do that.
I want to pivot a little bit. To understanding the marketing of a company this big in its role and how you just approach it. So again, let's eat the elephant one bite at a time here. How does it go about it? How does it position itself? How do you just kind of break it down and start at a 3,000-foot level of how you guys view marketing for the organization?
Sure, and I think, Pat, I'd start there by talking about, from our perspective, the difference between marketing and advertising. And you two are the experts, and this could certainly be a conversation. You think about a lot of the household brands, even ones in our industry, like a General Electric, a Siemens to an extent as well. They're doing a lot of advertising. You watch the Super Bowl, you'll see a commercial. Eaton has intentionally chosen not to go that route, which is why maybe some of your audience isn't as familiar with Eaton as some of these other brands. But we do go all in with how we view marketing. And we look at marketing to be more, to be less about brand awareness. We know we have a strong brand in our industry. We know the values of our brand, and we stand behind that. But what we really focus those dollars and that marketing budget on is customer education, certainly segment awareness, and then also customer acquisition. How do we get the right message to the right customer at the right time through the right medium? And that last piece, that right medium, is the piece that is changing drastically. And if I didn't talk about digital, I'd be very remiss, because it used to be you were the first to call on your customer during a project Or your customer would have a project and they'd call you and say, okay, salesman, saleswoman, come in here. I need some help. And now as you do your research, you find out a customer is 60 to 70% through that journey, through that decision-making process before they want to speak to the manufacturer or the sales rep. And this is certainly for our equipment. It could be for a vacuum cleaner, any consumer good as well. So our dollars are really spent on how do we make it so that the customer can get the information that used to be delivered by a salesperson about a technology, a solution, availability, all of that, application notes on their own terms. There is definitely less boundary around how business hours are defined. You know, you may have someone globally who wants to search for a solution and it's 3 a.m. where that account rep may be, because we have a global account structure. So that information has to be readily available to them, and that individual has to be able to find it quickly. So when you think about how we think about marketing, it's definitely that digital avenue. Is our website proficient enough? Are we pushing content through podcasts, LinkedIn shows? We did a game show very recently called Ask the Expert, which was, it was quite entertaining. But again, the other statistic that I hear from my marketing communications group is the average attention span of an adult is 8 seconds. And we have 8 seconds to capture their interest and make them want to click to the next page or think a little bit more about us. So how do we get those really quick, meaningful messages in front of our customers?
So Carrie, to that end, then how are you and the team kind of assessing how good you're doing to those key segments, right? I mean, on consumer brands, Kurt and I both know there's a lot of time and energy spent on focus groups, a lot of time in consumer research and so forth. Talk to us about on the B2B space, how you guys are collecting that information to say, hey, listen, this used to be a very important segment for us and it's no longer. Or conversely, we didn't even have our eye on this one and now it's becoming a big thing, right? So, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And there's a few different areas. The first one that comes to mind is we do some of those surveys and more traditional methods that you would think. We just think about it differently. Now we measure our net promoter score. So the questions have changed. How many of our customers would recommend us to a colleague? And in many of our industries, utilities is a great example. It's not that there's not competition, but there is camaraderie. So the utility in this city will talk to the utility in the city next to it, and I'm having this issue. What have you done? So if our net promoter score is high enough that customers will reference Eaton and they will talk to their peers about us, that works really well for marketing because there's no budget needed for that. So we certainly measure ourselves in that way. And then we do track standard customer retention rates. Every month we're looking at, in our core industries, how are we compared to market growth? And we're a little bit lucky in that there's a NEMA organization, National Electric Manufacturers Association, where they compile data from companies like Eaton and our competitors. So we have a relatively good idea what our market is doing month to month, and a very good idea of how Eaton is performing against that market and against our peers. So market share is a great indicator of how our marketing efforts are working.
Wow.
I like what you said earlier, where it's like, you don't look at it from an advertising perspective. You're kind of church and state. It's really the focus on the marketing. I think you're spot on. And I think, we see it too with clients that we work with. There are so many channels these days, and there's so many ways to crisscross your stakeholders, internal and external, as well as share your story. And when I even think about some of the things we've done with mining companies, and I'm like, it wasn't advertising, but I can tell you right now, you're absolutely right, Carrie. It was 100%. It was marketing involved, heavy marketing, and that investor relations initiative. What are what are you seeing? So obviously you've got a lot of experience. Eaton is doing a lot of things. So your space is very much, the manufacturing industry. That said, you have an eye on what's going on within manufacturing, but you're also an average person. You see what's happening with other brands. Let's start with manufacturing. What are you seeing other brands, other manufacturers doing that, you say, yeah, that's innovative. That's interesting. Because I wasn't kidding earlier. I do think some of the most innovative marketing that's coming out, it's in manufacturing B2B. So what are you seeing out there that you're really digging, what other brands are doing, or just what's your take on the industry in general?
Yeah, so it's a tough challenge when you've got a product that's it's not attractive to the masses, right? It's not a beer, for example, that people are going to buy anyway. It's just a matter of which brand in this moment. You're standing at the beer cooler and it's more about your display.
Right.
This is when you're talking about electrical equipment overall, it's a well thought out decision. There's a different process that starts all the way back with the consultant writing specifications. So I think the challenge for Eaton is we have to be engaged with every cog along the way, writing specifications. So working with marketing to that consultant and the electrical and or mechanical contractor, the facility owner, the end user. So what I think the manufacturing companies are doing is finding ways to craft specific messages. So you talk about mining as an example. So now how do I craft a message specific to that industry, but also specific to the role that person has? And within Eaton, as well as a lot of other similar companies, we use a process called design thinking, which is getting a lot of traction. And it is really about user-oriented outcomes. So instead of sitting down thinking about product specifications, what's the rating, what's the feature set, we will go send a team of marketing folks and engineers to work alongside the customers and see the installation process of our equipment so they can really firsthand understand how is it used, what is the purpose of this. If you think as basic as a circuit breaker, does it matter what ratings it has and all of the approvals? Absolutely. Is that your differentiator? Absolutely not, because the playing field is the same. Everybody has that. So if you think at the core of that, what's the purpose of this circuit breaker, right? It's to interrupt a circuit. It's to avoid an overcurrent situation, whatever that safety mechanism may be. But now you think to the next step. What happens once that circuit breaker trips? How does somebody know? And this brings in, how do we make our product more intelligent? And that's where all of the buzzwords you hear about data analytics and smart technologies, we choose not to use the term smart circuit breaker because it's so generic. But how do you take all of this intelligence from products and give that information back to the customer? And does that become your lead in your marketing? So you're not selling a product to a customer, you're selling information to that customer, which is groundbreakingly new in a traditional hardware industry. And I'm not sure by your faces if I've totally
No, you're blowing us
confused
away.
you.
This is really, really interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's what I'm hearing, and I've seen it. It's like the number of influencers that are part of the process, the decision making process, influence the purchase or whatever. I mean, it's you've got to speak their language. You have to give them the type of information they need. So at the end of the day, I hear what you're saying, where it's like, there's, from a differentiator perspective, what is it then that is pushing your customers in a variety of categories? Because you're right, they live in so many. What often is the reason they're going to you. What is your differentiator? Let's just say it. It's like, what does it
Yeah,
come down to
so
often?
if I talk now about my division specifically,
Yeah.
depending on where in Eaton, I can answer that question a million different ways. But
Let's talk your
Yep.
area then.
Yep.
so my division, earlier I said Eaton is a power management company. My division focuses on motor control. So if you are a machine builder and you've got a motor in there, how are you stopping that motor? How are you reversing that motor? How are you controlling the speed of that motor? And now you have all of these accessories. You've got the belt to worry about. You've got all of these maintenance concerns. So my value proposition would be, how does my equipment not only control your motor the way you're used to, but how on the side do we connect, you use the term IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things. How do we collect enough data to now go back to the customer and say, our product, whatever it may be, in this case, let's talk about a low voltage drive. It has collected this information to tell you that from a predictive maintenance standpoint, you have X many operations left before you're going to have an issue on this piece of equipment. Or we predict in 8 hours, your belt's slipping, you're going to have an issue there, or whatever that case may be, because the word uptime, you hear it in data centers all the time. It's definitely relevant in manufacturing. And we all know they're not making money if they're not manufacturing. So if we can proactively tell them what maintenance needs to be done and when, so they can plan for that according to their production schedule, and maybe when they have a shift change or a holiday, that is one way we can provide that value proposition to them. How do we make the manufacturing company's maintenance group, operations group, better and more efficient at what they are doing? So what I hope you're hearing is, it's nothing about the product. It's about how can they run their operation better.
Right. Carrie, I want to pivot a little bit. I want to talk, because you're just very, very unique in the fact that you have both sales and marketing reporting into you. So first of all, I want you to give us just, how do you view both sales and marketing? Like, the role of marketing does this, and here's where sales comes in. Talk to us a little bit about how you look at that and how you kind of organize both kind of departments, right?
Yeah, so there's always that kind of battle between
Yep.
marketing and engineering, between marketing and sales. And this is definitely not painting marketing as the bad guy. It's that marketing is in the middle. And that's one thing I should say within Eaton. That's truly how we view the company. The marketing person, we encourage them to be almost a mini entrepreneur. They get involved in operational decisions. They get involved in engineering priorities. They get involved in helping the salespeople. But more specific, Pat, to your question, especially now, there has to be a partnership. And the reason I say that is, you can listen to any news station and you hear the challenges that not just manufacturing, but a lot of companies are going through. So if you take the supply chain challenges, we have limited availability of product. We're a public corporation. How do we take that product and best serve our customers? And that has to be a team effort between marketing and sales. We have limited resources. You hear terms like the Great Resignation or the war for talent. And I have a lot of openings in my engineering department right now, which means at this point, there's only so many new product development projects I can embark on. So how does the salesperson and the marketing team partner to figure out what is the best utilization of the resources that we have? What should we be focused on? And then clearly, as we talked about the whole changing landscape to go more digital, to have these more intelligent power management solutions, we have to educate our customers. We talk about knowledge transfer internally as we have subject matter experts preparing for retirement. How do we transfer that knowledge to the next generation inside the company? Our customers are experiencing that as well. So how do we help our customers do that? And again, that's a partnership between the sales and marketing team. So my marketing team is out visiting customers with a salesperson quite frequently to cover all of those areas. Back to the design thinking I mentioned on priorities, from new product development to how do you utilize the product to get the data you need? What specifically do you need? And a lot of our products, if not all of them, are firmware software-based products. So someone has to take the customer requirements and articulate it back to the engineering people who can write the algorithms for them to get the customer the data they need. So as long as those two are lockstep, and I like your question, how do you manage it? Because I also like to say some healthy conflict is good. If they're always agreeing, and this is not just marketing and sales, this is anyone in my organization. If there's always agreement, I'm not creating the right environment for transparent, difficult discussions. And if you think about the companies that really will become the game changers, they are the ones who are willing to have those tough discussions and disagree, and then come to an agreement together at the end.
Yeah, you know what I love about the philosophy, as you were breaking it down with how marketing lives, you're breaking down those walls, because I've worked with organizations where you got marketing, Carrie, and then it's like engineering, boom. It's like I'm running through a brick wall, or sales. The way you're describing it, it's like it's almost like there's this marketing can soak. I'm going to use that. It soaks into engineering, but it also soaks into sales. And that you're taking away what is often just, it is an obstacle. I hate to say it, but we all know marketing and sales can collide, or there's a blurred vision of what that definition is. But I've seen it. I've experienced it where marketing and engineering just, oh my gosh, we're talking two different languages, and neither understands. That's pretty cool. So, with your background, obviously you bring a lot to the table, but there's also this leadership perspective. So we would be remiss if we didn't also look back at the last 2 years. We've had this thing called, the pandemic we had, and that impacted hiring, as you had alluded to, supply chain. But I would also say culture has been impacted too. And it's something we've been hearing, Carrie, on the show a lot, where we talk to our guests, and it's not that we want to dwell, but it's like, what have we learned? What have we seen? So from a culture perspective, it's like, or just in general, look back at the last 2 years, what have you seen from a culture perspective? What's changed for the better, for the worse? What's your take on it?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot has changed when it comes to culture. And I think if you think in general, building culture, it's not an easy thing. Eaton has a framework that we can use for it, but it's very specific to individuals. So you think about the pandemic time, us, along with many other companies, we were closed. We had manufacturing plants that were closed on and off globally. We had office space that was closed, much more so than manufacturing environments, because a lot of the office is very China-centric and US-centric. And I think what's changed for the better is that we've learned to be effective in that environment. We've learned that there are tools like Microsoft Teams that we're using now, like Miro for collaboration and having live whiteboards. We've learned that there are tools that make us effective no matter where we are. And I think a lot of our workforce has gotten comfortable with that. They've become proficient with that. And it's become a preference for that. So as we think about culture as an employer going forward, it's how do you balance what the worker wants wherever and whoever they are. And I mean that in a couple ways. The remote versus in-person balance that Eaton has created flexible work solution programs for the employees whose jobs can be accommodated with a fully remote working situation. We've already changed our standard, our basis for new employees coming in to be 3 days in the office, 2 days wherever you like. That could be in the office, That could be at your home, that could be at your vacation house somewhere else. As long as you're working, we don't care where you are. And then, of course, we've got those who want more flexibility, and we have ways to achieve that. The other area that we are hyper focused on is a term that I've tried to use a little bit more often, called bringing your whole self to work. And the philosophy there is, how do you create an environment where your employees can use their uniqueness to their advantage, whatever that may be, rather than feel a need to diminish some aspect of themselves, whatever that may be? How can you not have your work persona be different than who you really feel you are? How do I, as a leader, create an environment where it's all integrated? I think we all work in a time where your work and your personal lives are no longer separate. They blend together. I may pay my bills or take kids to doctor's appointments during the workday, but then I may work at night. And I'll be honest with you, I don't care where my employees work, what times they're working, as long as they're getting their stuff done. And there's certain times where collaboration with a certain region of the globe is needed. And you kind of know you're going to have a 6:30 a.m. call when you need to talk to China or India, but then you could be done with your workday by 2 o'clock that day. So it's really thinking about finding out what employees need and asking them, what do you need? What are your challenges? What are you facing outside of work that inside of work we can help you with?
Well, we're learning, because none of this was taught in business school. Some of the things that we've been going through the last 2 years, it's unbelievable.
Hey, Kurt, Kurt, can I jump in?
Yeah,
I got a question.
Sure.
Carrie, this is really interesting. What I'm hearing from you is that, I mean, look at all the things that you're working on: marketing, you've got sales, you're talking about culture, so that's HR. You're responsible for the bottom line, so there's that whole element as well. And then you're an engineer by training. Break it down for us. You must have some sort of playbook for how you tackle challenges. There must be a Carrie method of, like, okay, how do you give us that? How do you look at a problem, and how do you start breaking it down? Because you're dealing with so many different disparate things coming at you that you've got to have a playbook for this, that you just go, okay, here's the problem, here's this, we're going to take a look at this, and that's going to get me close to where I need to go.
Yeah, I wish, Pat, I could take out a piece of paper and show you, this is my playbook and this is how I solve the world. It's never that easy. But I will say, a few things that I have learned that work for me, and maybe could be helpful to others out there, is you have to learn a true understanding of what you control and what you don't control. If you don't control something, I just kind of push it aside and say, let's put this on the back burner. Let's focus on what I can control and create an action plan there. And then for the things that you don't control, it's all about contingency planning. And within Eaton, we like to use, well, what if this? What would you do? What if this? And we don't necessarily come up with a dozen scenarios, but what are the 3 most probable scenarios of what you don't control? And just be prepared for how you might respond, because we don't want to be put in that reactive situation. We want to have a plan. Another thing that I think of is, as you say, every day you can have emails, IMs, all of this requests for your time coming at you. There are buckets that I mentally use, and time critical is different than important. And maybe there is something that is urgent and time critical, and that's your number 1 priority. Then there are a bunch of really, really important things, but maybe they're not time critical, but this medium important thing is time critical, so I'll look at that. And you just kind of balance your day in these mental chunks of time. And somehow we just get through it. I mean, the biggest lesson that I still struggle with is, I don't want to say the word delegation, because I think I've gotten a lot better there. But I know myself that I am a very action-oriented person, to the point where if I'm talking to my boss and he's asking me to do something, I'm doing it before he's even done speaking. And I have to learn to slow down a little bit. And I have to learn, when do I think this is the action that needs to be done, but it doesn't need to be done immediately. It doesn't need to be done by me. And it sometimes doesn't need to be done perfectly. That good enough is good enough philosophy sometimes. So it's really prioritization and time management, which are different for everyone, tough skills to manage.
I love how you said that, where we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll use an analogy like that at our agency, where it's like, if you're waiting for the best plan, your boat will be at port forever. Sometimes you just have to sail and figure it out at sea, and just pick your course. Before we turn the page, I do want to go back a little bit, ties a little bit into culture, but I like what you said a little earlier. You were saying, in today's day and age, the company and our personal life are so intertwined. It's all in one. And as marketers and brand practitioners, we're big believers that, all brands, like, people have personalities. So, we're getting a taste of, I know you, so I know your personality, but our listeners are learning more about you. But talk to us a little bit, if you could, briefly. What is the personality of Eaton? If you had to put a personality against it, maybe just pick a few words, and does that then trickle down to the types of people that you're hiring too, Carrie?
I certainly hope it does. We, again, are a values-based company, and our executive leadership team has clearly defined for us what those leadership attributes are. And this might be a test if any of them ever watch this, but we do competency-based interviewing. I love the philosophy that we shouldn't be interviewing to a resume anymore. We should be interviewing to who that person is and what they've done in the past as an indication of what they can do in the future. So we look for individuals. First and foremost, ethics is non-negotiable. That's highest level of ethics has to be on that list. Secondly, passion. What are they passionate about? Do they, from a sales perspective, when I was hiring salespeople, one of the trick interview questions I would ask is, what do you do in your spare time? What do you do for fun? And I'd say it casually at the end of the interview. And really what I want to hear is team sports, individual sports, anything that has some relative competitiveness to it. Are you a competitive person in a sales role? Because that's a really good thing. If you're looking for an engineering role, are you passionate about mechanics or something else that you're doing in your spare time to show that you really are in an environment, a career field that you're passionate about? I personally look for accountability. That's one of my hot buttons. It's not my job. This is not my lane. That comment about culture, I think everybody owns culture. I say the same thing about projects. You may be the finance lead on this project. You may be the engineering lead on this project. We all own the success of the project. And that is a work hot button for me when anybody uses terminology that shows that lack of accountability. And then the other ones, at least within Eaton, are being efficient in what we do, having a learning mentality, and then transparency. I think our leadership team has done a really good job of a company that was founded in 1911, really conservative, traditional manufacturing culture, and turning us into this environment where you can challenge your boss or your boss's boss. You can have a difficult conversation with an employee and give them some feedback on how to improve themselves. And as long as we're respectful and doing this in the right environment, don't shy away from tough conversations. So it gives you a little bit of a flavor of what Eaton's personality is, I hope.
Well, it does. It does give me some insight into what Eaton's personality is. And here's the cool thing. No, I mean, you're laughing. No, it's like, there's definitely, when you describe Eaton's personality, you've described a lot of you. And that's good.
That's good to hear.
That's great to hear, because obviously that's kind of what I was hoping. Like, there's a personality, and the brand obviously is hiring people that, parallel that personality and champion that personality. Carrie, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask. So I want to talk about women in manufacturing. obviously you're a leader. You have been creating one heck of a path. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's been your perspective on where the industry sits in terms of women in manufacturing? What's your perspective on that? The next generation, as the marketing or the manufacturing industry evolves, because obviously, you've done so much and you continue to do so much. So what's your philosophy on where it sits? Enough, not enough, and what are you doing in terms of pushing up that next level?
Yeah, so I will say very clearly, there's not enough women in manufacturing. We measure diversity in a bunch of different ways, female talent at different levels of the organization, as well as other diverse talent. And until the population inside all companies, especially at higher level roles and in technical roles, matches the overall population in general, I'm not going to stop my work in this area. So I focus a lot of time here. I would say when I think about that next generation, let's talk about whether it's male or female. If you think about the attributes that I associate with that next generation, which it goes against the stereotype, because I think you'll hear a lot of these, whether it's millennials, Gen X, Zs, saying that that's not us. We have these stereotypes that don't really describe us. What I see with the folks that I've hired, curiosity, very strong curiosity, a desire to improve what they are given. And a lot of that means the world itself. They are environmentally conscious. They want to create a sustainable planet overall. They clearly want a better balance in life, back to that integration. You think about our parents would work to live. No, I got that backwards. Our parents would live to work. These individuals, they work to live, and they will design their careers around where they want to live and who they want to live near, as opposed to the individual who would move 20 times for their career. And manufacturing needs to change and adapt for that. And I think the way we can do that drastically is with we talk a little bit about automation, and I explained a little bit before about how we can do remote monitoring of motors, but also what can we do in the manufacturing world with some of these digital technologies, these automation technologies, to make this an exciting environment for individuals who have this curiosity and all these other attributes, want to stay in manufacturing. So I think about things like additive manufacturing, which is really what commonly is known as 3D printing. So you gain efficiencies in that product concept to final production. And this is just really taking off in the manufacturing environment, and how we use it long term is still to be determined. You think about process optimization, so that desire to improve what they are given and make things better. There's a lot of opportunity for that in the manufacturing space, all meant to show that it's not that grueling environment you may think of. We talked in that pre-call about what's depicted in the movies. I think almost any background and now I'm talking about from a interest or college degree or equivalent work experience perspective, can find a suitable role in manufacturing. Maybe it's not in the plant, maybe it's not in the operations, but all the realms of marketing we've talked about: digital marketing, marketing communications, product management, sales, finance, human resources, supply chain is obviously a growing realm, continuous improvement, data analysts. I mean, I could probably talk for 3 more hours with all these manufacturing company roles that, data analysts didn't exist 10 years ago. So if I could speak to that younger next generation, I would say, don't rule out manufacturing, because it is a great place to be and it's changing rapidly. And if you like that excitement, think about it.
Carrie, I know we're running out of time here, and
Yes.
I have to ask you, though, because I'm just fascinated with this, is what's keeping you up at night? I mean, if I look at you and look at the organization. What did you say? 17.9 billion, right? You're in a heavy duty manufacturing place. What challenges are out there that you see? It's like, whoa, we got to keep our eye on this. I mean, you seem like you have such a big and deep moat, but I don't know the space like you do. So what, when you wake up, what are you thinking about it in the 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, I'd say that three things, let's just say, are, am I doing everything I possibly can to keep my employees safe? Manufacturing environments are fast moving. There's a new facility, greenfield facility that we opened in Juarez, Mexico several months ago. So lots of new employees there. Am I keeping them safe and doing everything possible to give them the training, the tools, the protective equipment, everything they need to be safe? The second thing is, I like, when we think about performance management and development, I like to talk to people about, it's been such a tough couple years, supply chain constraints, logistics issues. I don't necessarily rate people on what happened. I rate people on, if someone else had been in that role, would we be in a better or worse situation? So what keeps me up is my boss thinking about that. If somebody else was in my role, would we be making different decisions? Would we be in a better situation? And every day that he pays my paycheck, I think he's saying, no, you're the person that I want. And then the next thing that keeps me up is retention. Am I taking my personal desire to be in an office and be around people because that's my personality? Am I taking that out of my decision-making process? Or am I making choices for my employees that will retain them and give them the best opportunity for success, regardless of what my personal preferences are? So those three things: the safety piece, is this person, including me, doing it better than anyone else? And am I doing all the right things to retain my employees, give them the resources that they need to be successful? Are the things I think about at night.
It's a great answer. I love to ask this question too. I love to ask a lot of our guests when they come on. I'm a big believer that life is about moments and sometimes chance. I really do. I believe that, in terms of, like, you look back and like, oh gosh, had I not gone to the bar that night, or had I not done this that day, right? It's your life changes. So from Carrie's perspective, and we can focus more on the professional. So that, but as you look back on your life, Carrie, your career, what was one of those pivotal chance crisscross moments where you came across someone, or something happened that it was just, that was it? That's what kind of, it just changed the course of your career or where you were going to go? It's like, because I've had some of those and I'm like, yeah, what about you?
I'll give you it's a true story, Kurt. You just can never use it against me. I think you may know that Ellen knows. My now husband and I met very early. We both worked for Eaton. I'd been with the company for a year. He'd been there a couple years longer, and I was training him on a new system. So, we're kids out of college at that point. Now you fast forward probably 6 years from that point on, and we had started talking more. So we made that progression from coworkers to friends to just an interesting conversational relationship, a little bit flirty. And at that point in time, I had been looking outside the company. This is, we're both still with Eaton, and I had a job offer from another company at the time, and it was a great job. But the one thing that held me back was, if I take this job, I will probably never talk to Chris again. And having no idea what my future held for me in that specific area, I didn't take the job. And now you go 20 years later, and I've become a VP of the company and have 3 kids with the man. So
that's awesome.
Don't build his ego by letting him know that story, but
that's awesome.
I will not build his ego, but I did not know that story. And that is a really cool story and a great answer to, this is, I see a visitor behind you, but a great answer. And that's pretty cool. That is definitely a crisscross moment and a decision that you made that was pivotal to your life.
Just that intuition. Yes.
Yeah. So one of my final questions would be, and you knew this one was coming, whether it's manufacturing, advertising, healthcare, I don't care what the industry is. What advice are you giving to leaders out there? Because it's a crazy time right now. And if you could just break it down, what would you tell folks? Start doing this instead, or just give some advice.
Yeah, I would say, clearly when I think about what makes a leader a good leader, for me, it's there's a few things and they all revolve around communication. So are you clear about your vision, your strategy, your purpose? Are you helping employees connect to that so they have this personal attachment to it? Are you clear with what your expectations are of employees so that no one's confused? I remember having a conversation with a manager of mine when I was very new to leadership. And, essentially, we were talking about a performance issue. And he said, no one wakes up any given day and says, I want to come to work today and do a bad job. So as we were talking about this employee that I thought was a performance issue, he was asking me, have you investigated what is preventing them from performing better? Do you have any idea what's going on in that person's personal life? What challenges are they facing in the office? What are their relationships like with other departments? What's their workload like? And essentially put some of that responsibility back on me to help the employee. And of course, there comes this point where you cannot invest more in them than they are investing in themselves. But I think if leaders can remember that at the end of the day, it's not about what we can do. I mean, I may think I'm a smart person, but it's not important what I do. It's how do I create an environment and a desire for other people to perform their best by being a good communicator, by leading by example, by, you saw a kid walk through the refrigerator here in the background, making sure my employees understand I have challenges in my personal life and we talk about them and create that bond with your team so that they do feel they can do their best and have the tools and support to do their best every day. It's really a simple thing to say, but I think we all know it's very, very hard to do.
It is. Carrie, as we always do when we wrap up, we give the floor to our guests, obviously. So were there any questions you wish we would have asked? You wish Pat would have just Kurt asked the right question. I wish Pat would have asked this question. But anything that's on your mind, anything you want to plug, anything you want to say, final words are yours.
Thank you. So I certainly have appreciated this time in the conversation and enjoyed it immensely. The one thing I would add, whether it's about leadership or just people in general, is I think having an initiative as a leader, that's not about your day job, but what else you can do for that next generation and do for your company is important. And I kind of go back and forth between trying to focus on that I&D you mentioned earlier. I taught some classes within Eaton about inclusive leadership styles and aspiring female talent. And now I'm focused really on the mental health aspect of that as a son diagnosed as on the autism spectrum and with pretty severe anxiety as a teenager. How does the workplace become part of your support mechanism rather than a cause of that stress? Are you giving the right resources? Is the culture you're providing your employees inclusive of conversations around mental health challenges? And are you helping employees navigate what's going on in their personal life? So that certainly is my parting thoughts to leaders and to everyone is be open to conversations that make you uncomfortable, because it may be the difference between an employee staying or going, or just accelerate their performance because they're feeling that support from their leader and their company. People work for people. We should remember that.
Well, I will say this: we definitely got our money's worth with you today, and I mean that in a good way. I mean that genuinely, because we covered so many topics, and I think it was the reason we were able to be so flexible with you is because of your background. And we talked about, the brand, the marketing, that your discipline, but also just the intangibles from a leadership perspective, as well as just the insights in general that you have, Carrie. So first of all, I want to thank you. This has been awesome. And I'm glad that I was able to recruit you that one night at the soccer game when you happened to.
Maybe I should have used that as that
by
cross-reference
chance,
question.
Carrie sat
Yeah,
next to
you
me.
didn't use that, Carrie.
Hey, so that was awesome. But on that note, there you have it, folks. This has been Over a Pint with Kerry Tingley. We cannot thank her enough for joining us. It was awesome. Thank you, Carrie. You were dynamite, as we knew you would be. And till next time, everyone, cheers.
Cheers.